Used cooking oil, is that a new liquid gold? It is a news from SPN Global. We can listen to it.
Hello and welcome to Platts Commodities Focus Podcast, a series by S&P Global Commodity Insights. Today we will be talking about a commodity that is found in every household, used cooking oil. How this waste product has now become almost like liquid gold because it can be reused to fire our cars and even planes, and it is good for our environment. I'm Elizabeth Thang, Managing Editor of Sugar and Biofuels in Asia. Joining me in this episode are Donovan Lim, Senior Biofuels Editor. Donovan looks and tracks the daily biofuel markets within Asia Pacific. And Lauren Pouet, a biofuels analyst whose focus is a bit more broad-based and who studies policy and long-term outlooks for this space. So in today's podcast, we will discover how used cooking oil, also known as UCO, went from being a waste product to a price commodity, how UCO is now gaining importance in the space of transportation fuels. Countries are transitioning away from traditional fossil-based fuels to greener fuels, is leading the growth of this industry. So we're familiar with used cooking oil. It's oil that one cooks with, and after you're done, you can't use it in the kitchen anymore, so we chuck it out. But we know not to throw it down the drains because it will clog, and you have to spend too much time hiring a plumber. But if it doesn't clog up your sink, it gets into the environment and contaminates the plants and harm animals. So Donovan, how does a waste like used cooking oil become such a valuable commodity?
Well, the story started quite a while back ago, probably in 2017-18. Back then, used cooking oil was just exported in low quantity in flexi bag from China. But biodiesel suppliers from Europe took a liking from the oil due to the double counting properties, and soon the used cooking oil was exported out in bulk rather than flexi bag. So by 2019 to 2020, major buyers have established collection tanks across the country in China, and they begin exporting UCO in bulk in, let's say, MR cargoes like 30,000 tons and above, while the flexi trade took a back seat. And these buyers have seen expanded their used cooking oil collection to other parts of Asia such as Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
So you've been covering UCO prices for a while now. What are the prices of UCO in North Asia? What are the fundamentals that are driving these markets?
UCO prices are around like 1,200 USD to 1,300 USD per metric ton on the offer side in China, but buying has slowed down due to collapse in demand in Europe as prices fell. UCO is used for the production of Yukomi, and Yukomi prices on the offer side have also slowed down with bids as low as about 1,490 per metric ton, and offer side sellers are still holding on to 1,600 and above. Well, fundamentally, the biodiesel market has been quite volatile over the past few months due to a number of factors. For example, the Indonesian government has initiated an export ban on palm oil in May, and after that lift up the export ban and try to expedite export of palm oil, causing a collapse in prices. And European biodiesel demand has been affected by the volatility in the gas oil market, as well as overflowing supply of UCO and Yukomi at the ports, which led to a lack of demand in Asia side.
So the demand for UCO is very much connected with the demand in biodiesel. So Lauren, is biodiesel demand purely a function of policy? What do you see as the growth potential of UCO-based biodiesel and why?
Thanks for the question, Liz. The short answer to your first question is yes, but I would say it's primarily a function of government policy, not purely. For instance, in Asia, the market I cover, Indonesia has had a 30% blending mandate since 2020, even though the discretionary blending window was closed. meaning gas oil prices have been significantly lower than biodiesel prices. Despite this price discrepancy, Indonesia has maintained its biodiesel mandate. Now, going across into Malaysia, their biodiesel demand is a bit more market-driven. The country was originally scheduled to implement a nationwide 20% blending mandate in June 2021. Obviously, that has not occurred due to these record-high biodiesel prices. Instead, the country has opted to maintain its 10% blending mandate while also implementing B20, the 20% blending mandate, on a case-by-case basis, such as in the small territories of Labuan and Langkawi, but also in Sarawak State on the island of Borneo. Now, regarding your second question, the growth potential for UCO-based biodiesel is limited by not only UCO availability, but also by competition from renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, which also utilize UCO as feedstock. Now, in terms of availability, UCO's growth has been driven primarily by supply from China, which is the world's largest edible oil consumer and therefore largest UCO producer. As an example, since 2020, China has accounted for nearly half of the Asia-Pacific region's export supply by volume. And most of this supply goes to the European markets due to the EU's own blending mandates for biodiesel. In addition, demand for UCO-based renewable diesel and SAF has also taken off, which has put pressure on biodiesel given its lower price point in the market. However, it's not all doom and gloom for UCO-based biodiesel. There is growth potential for UCO-based biodiesel blended with marine fuel. Now, Singapore, where I'm based, accounts for roughly 20% of the world's bunker fuel sales. And just last month, in August, ports of Singapore and Rotterdam signed an MOU to establish a green and digital corridor that would promote the use of alternative bunker fuels, such as biobunkers. Now, the primary biobunker is Ukami, or UCO-based biodiesel, blended with very low sulfur fuel oil due to the IMO 2020's minimum sulfur requirements. So there are some alternative avenues for biodiesel growth.
It seems that UCO is being pulled in many different directions. It's going into the first generation and now into the second generation biofuels market development. So besides biodiesel, there's also renewable diesel. Can you explain the difference and what's your outlook for this market?
Okay, well, renewable diesel, it's also known as hydrotreated vegetable oil, or HVO, is a drop-in fuel that does not have the blending limitations that biodiesel has. In general, biodiesel has a blending wall that's dependent on the climatic conditions of a country. Basically, biodiesel tends to gel in colder conditions, which can damage the engine. Renewable diesel does not have this liability of gelling and causing damage to the engine. Now, in terms of the outlook for the market, for Asia, the market I cover, it's quite strong. In Singapore, which has the largest HVO production capacity due to the Neste plant here, they're set to double their actual production capacity early next year when their expansion project comes online. In China, the country's HVO capacity has rapidly expanded over the last 2 years since its initial slow start in 2016. In Indonesia, the state-owned energy group PT Pertamina launched HVO production at its Cilacap refinery complex in 2021 and is set to launch additional capacity in Sumatra Island in 2024 or 2025, kind of depending on how things progress there. In South Korea, the country will launch an HVO plant in 2024 just south of Seoul and plans to transition some of that production to SAF by 2025. And in Australia, they plan to launch 2 HVO and SAF refineries in 2025, one in Western Australia and another on the east side in Queensland. And Malaysia also plans to launch 2 HVO SAF refineries in 2025, perhaps 2026, one in Johor, right across from Singapore, and another in Sabah on the island of Borneo. And lastly, Japan will also launch perhaps up to 4 HVO SAF refineries in 2025. So the headline here is by 2025, a lot of production capacity is going to come online across Asia, which is going to put pressure on UCO because a lot of these plants will utilize UCO as feedstock. In terms of the market, it really depends on individual countries and plants where they're going to supply this HVO and SAF. A lot of it will be consumed domestically, but a lot of it will also be exported. In Singapore, a lot of supply goes to California due to their low carbon fuel standard policy. But for China, they're probably looking more at the European markets to supply because the EU has robust mandates in terms of UCO-based biodiesel and HVO. So the market is very much in flux, but it's definitely set to grow in the near and long term.
The refineries that produce all this renewable diesel, they can also push out sustainable aviation fuel. So what is the percentage of SAF within the jet fuel demand right now? Lauren, how do you see this market growing? Will it be as quick as the demand in biodiesel?
Well, in the Asian markets right now, SAF is in the test and trial phase of use. So it's a very, very small percentage of actual jet fuel consumption. Now, in Singapore, a few months ago in July, Singapore's Changi Airport received its first batch of commercial SAF through a pilot program that the country has established. Now, the SAF was consumed by Singapore Airlines and its budget subsidiary Scoot, and as part of the pilot project, Neste would supply up to 1,000 metric tons of SAF blended by jet fuel refined by ExxonMobil. So this is the initial start, 1,000 metric tons. That's not a lot, but it's a good first step. In June of this year, China's Sinopec announced that its subsidiary Zhenhai Refining in Zhejiang province, near Shanghai, just south, produced its first commercial batch of SAF. So now even China is entering the market, as it were. And Japan has actually been utilizing Neste-produced SAF through a partnership with Itochu, which in February of this year was expanded. So Japan, China, Singapore have all dipped their toe into the SAF pool, as it were. But in terms of policies, it's really a new market, so it can vary by not only country, but also by individual airline and airport. Now, in general, across the market, there's a trend towards having a 2030 blending requirement. Japan, for example, has a 10% blending requirement by 2030. But there is this net zero goal by 2050 that a lot of airlines and airports are kind of moving towards. So going forward, SAF definitely has strong demand growth, and that's why we see all this production coming online in 2025 and 2026.
Who is the biggest producer of UCO? And with all these channels of UCO being used for different purposes, is there enough UCO, you think, to supply all the demand generated?
Well, the short answer is no. There isn't enough UCO to go around. There's UCO demand coming from biodiesel. There's UCO demand coming from renewable diesel, SAF, and now biobunkers, marine biofuel. Now, UCO is a function of edible oil consumption. So the more French fries, the more instant noodles that are produced because palm oil is used in that production process, it's going to increase UCO availability. Now, in terms of edible oil consumption, China is the leading market, but also the EU is a big edible oil consumer. US, Indonesia, India, these are the top countries that are producing UCO. Now, there is a limitation because there's only so much that can be produced. So there's going to be high competition for this. Now, what's going to end up likely happening is whichever biofuel product garners the greatest policy support and the highest market price will likely get the most UCO. So that could dampen demand for biodiesel because in general, biodiesel has a lower price point when compared to renewable diesel and SAF. So it's going to be interesting to see how the market develops. Now, China is the largest exporter of UCO, and just last July, they recorded a record amount of UCO exports. So every month, it's a new record of exports. Also, in terms of Asia, Malaysia is a major collection and distribution point for used cooking oil. A lot of this goes to the European markets based on the EU's RED mandates, the Renewable Energy Directive. A lot of people, a lot of market participants are waiting to see how their biofuel mandates change and how UCO fits into that. So the market is still fluid and in development, but it looks very good for renewable diesel and particularly SAF production in terms of securing UCO supply.
Thanks for that, Lauren. So Platts have been tracking the UCO prices, and as you said, a lot of it comes out from China. So we have a price for UCO in China, and then we have the prices in Europe. Now, in this space, we have also added a new price. Don, would you talk us through this and explain how this new assessment came about?
Recently, we launched the UCO for China as well as the UCO for Straits assessment. The UCO for Straits assessment came out of the growing demand for UCO in the biofuels world, as a result of which buyers in Europe has been increasing their collection across Southeast Asia from Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and tanks have been established in Pasir Gudang as well as Port Klang. Hence, we think that the time is appropriate to launch a fourth UCO Straits assessment that reflect prices in this region, and collection of oil in this region could also grow in coming years. As for the UCOME Fort China price, as you know, UCO is used to produce not only second generation HVO, is also used in the production of UCOME, a more first generation product, and there has been demand for also UCOME in Europe as well as in the marine industry. Hence, the time is also right to launch a UCOME for China assessment, as flows from China for UCOME has been increasing over the years since 2018.
Thanks, Donovan, for highlighting those two prices. We've definitely seen growing demand for Asian UCO that originates or transits in ports around this region, going to demand centers like Europe and the rest of the world. So having FOB Straits UCO and Singapore UCOME prices will definitely give more transparency to market participants. At this point, I want to mention that subscribers can access all our premium content on Platts Dimensions Pro, where with your subscription, you can get daily prices, hard-hitting analysis, market updates, and much more. So since we've been talking about UCO and UCOME, we'll link the code for that content in Platts Dimensions Pro in our show notes. So please click on that link to get started. And final question, with the inflation at record levels and this war in Ukraine creating a food crisis, Lauren, how do you see this impacting the biodiesel or the UCO market?
Well, it's impacted biodiesel in terms of its relationship with gas oil, since biodiesel is a substitute for gas oil, or diesel, as it's also known. Now, the discretionary blending window for biodiesel has been closed since 2020 up until recently. Now, what I mean by that is that biodiesel was priced too high in comparison to gas oil to actually be blended given market prices. Now, recently, due to the conflict going on in Ukraine, crude prices have gone up and have been a bit unpredictable, which has been beneficial to biodiesel. And so over the past 2 months, the blending window has opened up, meaning biodiesel has reached price parity with gas oil. Now, whether that will maintain in the long term is very, very doubtful. But at least in the short term, it has been beneficial to biodiesel and has made it a viable substitute in terms of its price point when compared to gas oil diesel.
Well, that has been a very interesting discussion about something that's found in our daily lives. It's very encouraging to hear that it's being repurposed to lower carbon emissions, but there appears to be a lot of challenges. But having another price point for UCO will definitely help us track more closely how this market is developing. So thank you very much, Lauren and Donovan, for joining me in this conversation. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This episode was produced by digital content editor Ramya Nai.
This report was sent out a couple of years ago and should be 2 years ago or around 2022. After that, that's a few changes, and the UCO supply and demand is keep growing after that, and from our side we keep supply to Europe, and also we develop a new market in US, and also we saw some newer market like South Korea and Japan. The price was come down a little bit, and currently the price is around $850-900 US per ton. And yeah, we are happy to see they call used cooking oil as liquid gold, and hope we can keep growing. Thanks for watching. Bye.